moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and people have figured out they can send me mails, and I'll answer them. It's a Christmas miracle. Anyway, a lot of good messages. You're asking great questions. Here comes a good one that's more analysis than question, but it's on the money. So this message goes this way. It says, "Hello, Perch. I've seen comments from readers wondering why doesn't upper management and the money people at Marvel and DC won't do anything about the current state of comics, decrying the loss of sales numbers and its declining market share. I believe they don't do it because, from the point of view of the actual business people, the numbers are pretty good. The merchandising and licensed products are making bank thanks to movies and other media. When little Timmy watches Into the Spider-Verse and gets mom to buy him a Miles Morales lunchbox or backpack, that money doesn't go to Sony or Marvel Studios, but rather Marvel Entertainment, the division that owns comics." That's only half true, by the way, but your point is solid. The same happens with DC. A t-shirt with Batman's logo may have cost at most $2 to make and ship from China will be sold for $25, make more money than for them in a single shipment than the entire 30 and something Batman titles published during the entire year. Not exactly, but again, you're right in terms of the scale is pretty huge there. One note, and then we'll continue with your mail. It doesn't exactly work this way. The money isn't all rolled into the comics division. There is a separation between licensing revenue and comics revenue, and those are well understood, well described. And because these are public companies, I take it back. Marvel, Disney, does roll them up into kind of one group, and they obfuscate the specific silos underneath. Warner, during the sale to AT&T, you could get some specific carve-outs from these different groups. That was in the annual report that year. That may have rolled up as well, too. But my point here is that that's how the annual report goes. Internally, they're absolutely tracking, comic sales versus merchandise sales. And there is an awareness that the merchandise sales is being driven, like you point out here, from, say, Into the Spider-Verse, as opposed to somebody picking up a Miles Morales comic. Now, this is where things get weird, because you can make the point that, hey, if Brian Michael Bendis had not created a Miles Morales in Ultimate Spider-Man, and that character had not been kind of, gestated within the comics, and then ultimately turned into this movie that then turned into merchandise, if it wasn't for those original comics, none of it would have happened. And there's truth to that, because that was the origin point to these things. But also, it shows that these other mediums are, can take these items and run with them a lot further. Anyway, just as an aside. But let's continue with mail, because it's a good one. When it comes to the comics themselves, there are perennial selling classics that have already paid for themselves and have large margins, and the current output is at least breaking even or have an acceptable level of losses when one considers they still get to keep the very lucrative IPs and renew their very valuable trademarks. And the public at large mostly doesn't care about comics, as shown by the whole Jonathan Kent controversy, in which no one cared to properly assess that it wasn't Clark being altered. I know, for many, it's more the symbolic meaning of Superman still. Anyway, am I wrong in my line of thinking, or is there anything that I'm missing? No, your line of thinking is generally right. And I think this is one of those cases where, I don't know if it's exaggeration. It's this funny thing that happens with a lot of videos, a lot of comments. Like, for example, like when I make a comment, somebody comes in to argue, I always like how they're, the person who says, well, that was just a joke, or that was just an exaggeration. Why are you taking it so literally? It's like, well, I guess you're right. I shouldn't take it so literally. But if I don't take it literally, then somebody wants to know why I'm not taking it more specifically. So, there's always this moving target of what people are after. But your comments are correct. Comics are not the, oh my God, the world is falling apart, people are losing money. It's like a sea of red. I don't know if anybody is portraying it that way or not, but it's not true. Comics are not this massive money loss business. And again, for the sake of argument, so please, you don't need to come into the comments and go, nobody's actually saying that. I don't know if anybody's actually saying it or not. I'm just trying to calibrate where things are at. Comics are, on the whole, profitable. Generally speaking, and this is very generally speaking, you have about 20% that lose a small amount of money. The comics are low enough of an output of money, you don't have massive losses. Like if, the Uncancelable Wasp, that comic, which nobody remembers anymore, I'm going to have to come up with another joke. Let's do something else. Kazar, that comic is, at least from what I can tell, not doing particularly well. And who would imagine that it would? Like Kazar is not a household name. People aren't jumping up and down for Kazar. It's no offense to the creator, no offense to anything. It's just that's Kazar in general is going to be a uphill battle. So Kazar as a comic may break even or may lose money. But when you talk about losing money, it's not going to lose millions and millions of dollars because they're not coming anywhere close to spending millions and millions of dollars to make it. It's generally this comic is made fairly cheap. If a comic is made for, say, I don't know, $30,000 and it makes $25,000, then it's a $5,000 loss. And nobody wants to have a $5,000 loss, but a $5,000 loss is not a huge deal when you've got a multi-million-dollar company. But about 20% of the comics, anecdotally, are break-even or underwater. And then there's probably about 40% of the comics, maybe more than that, maybe like 50% of the comics that are making marginally a little bit of money. So they're making, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 per comic. Not a huge amount, but they're making money. I'm speaking extremely generically here. And then you've got kind of an additional 40%, 30 to 40% of comics that are making what I would call reasonable to good money. And this is where, you strike a deal or you have an incentive program or you got a variant, or maybe you just have on your hands a hot comic and it winds up, selling $100,000 over a cost. And that's considered a really great deal. And then on top of all of that, this is what I kind of described are floppies that are coming out every month. Then you have trades and you have the ability for what we'll call in this case, the aftermarket, where comics can make a lot more. So that's where things kind of sit. So it's not. Sometimes people trade this comics industry as like, oh my God, it's losing money. Oh, the crowdfunded comics are blowing it away. They're making so much more money than say Marvel or DC. Well, they're not. And again, that's it's funny. I don't think most people believe this. But every now and then you get somebody, I got into a very fierce argument with someone who was like, you realize that the Comicsgate comics are making 10 times the amount as Marvel. Well, no, of course they're not. And that's ridiculous. On every front. The volume of books coming out is nowhere close to the volume of books Marvel's putting out. They're just the price point, the deals, the distribution. Just like that's a silly statement to make. And I can say that's a silly statement to make, and that doesn't mean I'm on one side or the other. It's numbers at that point. Marvel and DC are making money. The question isn't really, are they making money? It's, could they make more money? And are they underselling? Are they basically surviving as a business that's not living up to its potential? Now, my argument would be absolutely. I think that there's a lot more money in comics if different things happened. If different choices were made, I think comics could be making much more than they're making now. And that has to go with distribution, it has to do with some of the content that's being put out, it has to do with the strategies that are being employed to reboot and change things around. It has to do with the fact that they say they want to grow their market, but they're not growing it in different places. It has to do with a lot of the stories being very one-dimensional. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's underserving its potential. But to the original, male's point, the male's, I don't know if it's a male, probably it's male, but it's an email. To the original email's point, the people at the top are looking at this portfolio, and you're right, they're probably looking at it from the standpoint of the comics, the license, the t-shirts, and everything else, and they're going, if you're sitting on top of Marvel right now, you're probably feeling pretty good. You've got a movie division that's still clocking along. You have TV now working with Disney Plus. You've got more and more toys, more merchandise. You have games. You have a Guardians game from Square Enix did that game, right? You've got a lot of stuff in addition to the comics coming out. You're looking at it as a broad portfolio. And so when you see somebody online who's going, your comics suck, you're dying, you look at kind of your balance sheet and you're like, no, that person's nuts, because that's not the reality they're seeing. I think that in general, kind of independent to this question, you, as much as possible, and I realize this can be hard, you should try and make yourself happy. If you are unhappy with these comics, don't buy them. Whether they're succeeding or failing really doesn't matter. I don't like Arby's. There are lots of Arby's out in the world. Arby's are selling $1 million worth of their sandwiches every single day. I don't go to sleep haunted knowing they're making money. That would be ridiculous. I know I don't like it, so I'm not going to go there. In this case with Marvel and DC, yeah, I think the business people believe the numbers are solid. And that's where I think there's this big disconnect between people who say your business is failing, and then they turn around and they go, no, it's not. And maybe the nuanced conversation, or maybe it's not even nuanced, the valuable conversation would be, couldn't you be making more money than you're currently making? Couldn't you be more profitable? Until the conversation really goes there, it's probably not going to be a very productive conversation. Because if we're going to be stuck in an argument of you're failing and about to die versus what, people at the top of Marvel and DC and others are seeing, I mean, it's not a very reasonable conversation. And I'll put it in a different direction. Let's say DC goes, you know what, why are we producing comics? We make more money off the licenses. We could license out the comics to another book publisher and they could kind of keep the things alive. Maybe they're only putting out 20 books a year, but who really cares? Because we've got this license and all these other things well in hand. They could make that decision. It would be a business-based decision based on money that is coming in. They could also turn around and go, no, we want to commit to comics. We're going to make dramatic changes to comics because we think we could 2x the amount of books we sell. They could do that too. Lots of different choices. But I do think you're correct in your mail. The reason why people aren't, you don't see people at the top panicking is because when they look at the numbers, there's not anything to panic about. Again, I think the nuanced point here would be a really smart leader would look at this and go, I'm greedy and I don't like this current share. I mean, I like it. It's profitable. I'm making money. I got my bonus last year. I'm happy, but I could make double. I would like a bigger bonus, bigger house, bigger car, more hookers. That's what I'm into. And that's what a true business person, businessman, businesswoman, whatever, somebody who's really aggressive would do. And I don't think that's going on. I don't think there's any big push to try and do more. I think, unfortunately, in management of comics, people are kind of resigned to, this is the way it's always been, and we're growing at this percentage point, and, nobody's really disrupting me. Nobody's really, threatening to take away my pie, so I don't really need to worry about it. I'm just going to keep clocking along at this current rate because that's what I know. That's the shame. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for the mail. It's a very good one. I appreciate the way you broke that out. And thanks for listening, everyone.